Good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started with our webinar in just a few minutes. We'll just wait for a few more people to join us. So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Global Brands are revolutionizing audience engagement with CTV personalization with Innovid here at the Forays. So before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our site at aaaa.org/webinar series business as unusual within probably 24 hours of this webinar. We will be taking questions during the webinar, so please use the Q&A feature on the Zoom toolbar. And now I'd love to get started and have our two illustrious panelists introduce themselves, and we'll get started right away. Thank you. Tal, why don't you start?
Thank you, Chick. Thanks for having us, and thank you for everyone tuning in. I'm excited to be an illustrious speaker of this on this panel. So I'm Tal Chalozin. I'm not gonna take too much time, but I'm Tal Chalozin. I'm CTO and co-founder of Innovid. Innovid is a video marketing technology platform which we started about 15 years ago, powering many brands in the connected television space with ads delivery, measurement, and creative personalization. About 5 months ago, we took the company public under the ticker CTV. So we're very, very excited to toot the horn of or raise the flag to CTV.
Great. And Suraj?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Suraj Gandhi. Never been called illustrious in my life, but I'll take it. That's great.
It's first time for all of us.
I represent IPG Mediabrands. We have a content studio which specializes in performance content, which I lead up globally, looking at personalization, addressable creative, and really excited to be here to talk about something that is actually close and to my heart and near and dear to what we're doing, especially with the Innovid crew. So happy to be here, and thanks for the time.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So, Tal, let's jump right into today's topic and tell us about CTV personalization, what it means, and what's actually possible today.
So, first of all, just to unpack that, you mentioned CTV personalization. So, starting with the word with personalization, which essentially is a device agnostic strategy. So it starts with brands that understand that it's not a one-size-fits-all marketing, which I'm sure what I'm saying is not new to everyone listening. It's obvious that people are very different and diverse, and the messaging should be, the way to communicate to them should be very different. Connected television is no different than any other marketing channel. However, just in terms of feedback that we're getting in the market, connected television evolved as a next generation television. In television, the whole idea of personalization was very limited due to limited technology capabilities. So this is why the world of personalization in connected television require a special emphasis to tell, handhold and work with customers to show, and marketers to show how the technology that is available out there could be applicable to the world of connected TV. So anything from variations of the message to through real-time decisioning of what version should be represented, all the way down to collecting metrics of success metrics, tying it into each and every version and each and every target audience in front of the screen. So again, the idea of personalization is not new, but bringing it into the big screen and into the living room is something that require this next step of evolution.
That's great. So Suraj, what is your agency trying to accomplish with your clients then with CTV personalization?
I think Tal said it right. When we think about personalization, when we think about having messages that are relevant to audiences, it's a channel agnostic, device agnostic approach. And it's really, we've been on this journey with our clients for about 8 years now. When when the onset of programmatic media as a concept came on, knowing that we had different ways of identifying and targeting consumers, that only naturally meant that we need to have messages that actually drive relevance to those consumers based on that data. And really what we've seen even since then is that marketers and advertisers these days cannot outspend their competition. And really what they need to do to connect with their audience is create resonance. And we see that personalization drives the best way forward for resonance and relevance together. And I think with CTV, it's our best opportunity to take something that we feel is probably linear, more traditional, and bring it into a 21st century digital age. So clients are extremely excited about this idea of taking an old channel, taking this more laid back environment and really treating it like a lean in environment.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Tal, so how does personalized creative create deeper engagement and resonance? Resonance, wonderful term, Suraj.
Suraj is definitely living up for the illustrious claim. It's, using big words. I'll highlight a few things to your point about how does personalization drive engagement. I think at a high level, it's not that it doesn't have to be overly sophisticated to understand that when there is some variation of a message on the screen in front of us that has better ability for me to have connection to, and it doesn't have to reference my name, or it doesn't have to be creepy to use crazy words, but it could be something that just a little bit more relevant to speak to the location of where I am located right now, or the weather that is here right now. I'm in New York City, and it's a beautiful spring day right now. So things that are winter related are clearly ill-fitted to the experience that I'm feeling right now, or anything about we see a lot of QSR restaurants that change their message throughout the day to fit. Again, nothing is rocket science, but to fit to the hours of the day, so that it will be more interesting and more exciting for viewers, because it's now breakfast is related to the relevant time of the day versus dinner or others. So I think that the big misconception around personalization, that many people think that this is a binary element. It needs to be super one-to-one message in order to really drive the engagement. But this is not true. It's a spectrum. And on one hand is the one message that everyone gets. On the other hand is exactly as I said, the creepy personalized message that gets more negative reaction than positive. But in the middle, delivering a message that is more relevant for me, that understands that I have a newborn, so maybe a message is related to a newborn in the household, is more interesting than none. or if I haven't bought a car in the last 10 years and I'm not planning to, probably seeing a pickup truck car ad is much less relevant for me. So again, personalization is a spectrum that really correlates to engagements.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It sounds like something of a more enriched vision of what people are calling contextual targeting. Would you say that that's true?
That is correct. I think the definition of a context is the interesting part here. So contextual, a lot of people refer to is the environment that the content is presented in. If I'm watching Score Center on ESPN, getting an ad that is somewhat related to the content. I don't know, Gatorade ad or something along those lines. That historically was context, mostly because this is all the data that we had is doing show level targeting or show level media buying and planning. Right now, where context is a much more robust world that because we can do, as I mentioned earlier, a big part of personalization of the technology that Innovid offers is the ability to do real-time decisioning. So the time of day is context, the location is context, the size of the screen that can attest to living room versus a kitchen versus something else is context, and so on and so forth. So the definition of context really expands, but I agree with you that the Holy Grail, which again is not rocket science, is you need to be respectful, and you as a brand need to speak to the environment that you're playing in.
Mm-hmm. So Suraj, so what kind of work do you need to do with your clients when you're working with your clients to, optimize their strategies against these capabilities and potential?
I I think Tal hit it exactly right when he's talking about one to one versus one to many, and that kind of middle with the one to few. That's actually a kind of a kind of a headline that we use around Mediabrands, is thinking about like what is the one to many message, what is the one to few, and what is the one to one. But it's all starting with business goals and the business objectives of our clients. We know from a marketing standpoint today, marketing and messaging and media have to drive a business KPI just as much as they are driving these marketing KPIs we've been beholden to so long in the past. But really, as the CFO and the CMOs get closer and closer together in organizations, it really comes back to the question of how we use that relevance and that breakthrough through media targeting, but also that messaging to connect with consumers. And so to the point of a Gatorade ad, for example, that needs to be aligned with a sports event or a championship, that can be a message that can be out there for multiple audiences and multiple mindsets, and it can still drive that awareness type or that share of voice type KPI that we're looking for. But and that level of granularity where they're doing some level of co-branding with, say, a Walmart, where you want to actually drive that purchase to an Instacart or a shopping situation where you want them to convert on that said Gatorade, is all part of the same audience first strategy. And that's how you think about messaging optimizations aligned with the media optimizations that you want to make, all ultimately to the goal of what's the ultimate brand business requirement.
Fascinating. That's great. One of the things that we were talking about, adding interactivity has been an advertiser's dream for a long, long time. Do you think we're here now with the capability, and that the audience is now ready and expecting interactivity in advertising?
Yeah, just to play on that part, we started Innovid back in 2008. With the dream that television will be a two-way communication, that viewers would lean forward, and will be an active role in the storytelling, or at least in the way that the engagement. It's clearly easier said than done, and we, in general, you can see it in so many different industries that people can dream faster than reality evolve, or at least that people utilize technology. I think that we're living right now in a very interesting transformational time because of the shift to streaming, because the idea of bringing interactivity for television and the ability to, there was this example back in the day of a Jennifer Aniston sweater. So you would watch an episode of Friends, and someone can shop the collection from Jennifer Aniston on Rachel from Friends. This idea is not overly sophisticated, but the viewers are not in the right mindset, or historically was not in the right mindset. However, right now, when television, or as we're getting into this new era, television is viewed through a digital device, which has engagement built into it. So the device you go out to buy doesn't have any content on it, and you need to install apps which you navigate through a remote constantly, or your voice. It has a lot of games on it, and the environment is very, very different than what it used to be when it was a Comcast set-top box or a Time Warner or a Spectrum set-top box, which was predominantly lean-back experience, into a device that's sometimes a gaming console, all the way to a streaming box that is much more of a lean-forward device. So that was a long-winded answer to say that we think that interactivity as a technology is now more feasible than ever because of everything we're experiencing. But a lot more important, interactivity is now more feasible from a participation standpoint of viewers because of the acceptance in this world. We're going to show examples later, and I can say that from Innovid's sake, and we just released our benchmark that shows that as time goes by, every year we're seeing a much better engagement and again this participation idea of viewers that picking up the remote and interacting with television, or taking their phone to scanning a QR code, or others in order to take an active part in the show.
Suraj, are you seeing a client interest in interactive ads also?
Yeah, and I think it's multifaceted, right? I think one being the fact that with television, it's always been focused on GRPs and reach and traditional metrics of measurement. Having interactivity allows us to actually think about a lot more enriched metrics and understand how consumers are interacting or not interacting with creative or media in this channel. I think the other thing to think about, remember, 20 years ago, a cathode ray tube, CRT, right, back in the day is what we used to call TV, is far less of what our TVs are today, and they're far closer to our phones or our computers, right? And I think software and technology, and I know this is a lot where Innovid has come in and pioneered this space, is the integrations with these softwares and these technologies, the hardware in TVs, has made it just a lot easier for consumers to be able to actually pick up the remote rather than go on the computer after the fact, so you're not disconnecting. And then I think we, as we've seen even pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic, second screening has been a lot of where people staying at home, interacting with their phones, interacting with their TVs, and then just looking, advertisers being smart enough to follow that consumer behavior and that insight, and then starting to create that connectivity between the message on the TV screen, the message on your phone, how your Wi-Fi is also a trigger point for messaging these days. So all those things combined, I think there's not only the advertisers' interest in this, but the consumer's interest, which is then leading the advertisers and brands there to really take advantage of those insights.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, I remember a number of reports at CES this year were talking about the really accelerated upgrade cycle on home technology, including TVs, and with families doing gaming and all kinds of interactive things with the TV as a sort of the new family hearth. It's really a sort of a profound movement. So that's really fascinating. So why don't we take a look, at some examples, Tal, and before we dive even a little bit deeper.
Of course, thought you'll never ask. Coming right up. Share my screen. So what we're going to see is a quick recap of a couple of examples, and then we can speak about it briefly. So we're starting with the idea of personalization, of how it's doable to bring a lot of capability that people know from display into the television. What you can see here is an example of interactivity for a brand like Whirlpool on the big screen. when we touched, Suraj mentioned second screen, so the use of QR code is coming up so much more right now. And then at the end, and we can touch on it later, but the holy grail is the ability to measure all of it. So it's not creativity for the sake of creativity, but it's creativity for the sake of measuring and driving results.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I wonder if TV remotes are going to start looking more like game controllers so that people can navigate the screen even better.
My bet is 100% that
Yep.
that's the case. In some cases, it's already happening because the
Yeah,
TV
fair.
is actually a gaming console.
Yeah.
But in others, yes, correct. Or voice to become a better, a more neutral way of interacting.
Yeah, there was another thing that came up at CES was how Samsung and others are starting to build cameras, of course, into the TV the way they are in your computer monitor, and that the interactivity two-way there can also potentially be programmed into advertising. There's some really fascinating things that are happening, and with people upgrading their TVs more regularly and now being used to doing that, perhaps those features will be available in the marketplace and with the population much faster than before. So
100%.
that's fantastic. So Suraj, just sort of going, into those possibilities and things like that, what do you think contributes to creative excellence in advertising once you've opened up all of these new possibilities and new capabilities on the TV?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think a lot of the challenges that advertisers particularly run into is just old ways of working, especially larger advertisers and enterprise level clients that have to really manage change more than anything else. I think a lot of creatives inherently think about this in their day-to-day lives, but then maybe when they come into the conversation as it relates to how it then applies to a brief from a client, that's when we start maybe looking at old habits a bit. So I think operational excellence drive creative excellence, and then a lot of what needs to change isn't a new skill set or a new way of working, but it's just using data and insights as inspiration to come up with big ideas and ideas that really drive impact, and then thinking about how those technologies that are available to us really enhance that, right? And I think what ends up happening a lot of the times, and Tal can probably speak to this more than I can, is that you end up seeing the shiny object with the technology, and then we try to retrofit something into that, and then all of it tends to fall flat, versus starting from a business mindset, thinking about your consumer experience, the consumer's behavior, what your brand objectives are, and then building out content and ideas that fit into these technology enriched platforms rather than thinking technology first.
Can agree. If I can, I don't know if that's
Sure,
allowed.
please.
I'm going off script, but if I can jump in and comment on Suraj, I promise not to behave before, but so I'm just trying to deliver on the promise. No, but just to comment on Suraj, maybe 2 points on creative. One, can't agree more. There's so many tendencies by creative technologists and technology company to focus on what's possible and not what's needed, or not how it's connected to business goals. So a lot of the work that we're doing with many of our partners at agency, and obviously at Universal McCann and with Suraj team for many years, is really aligning what's capable, but with what's actually needed, not doing it for the sake of doing. And another thing to highlight, which I think is very, very important, this is why we absolutely love teaming up with Suraj team, is that if you think about holistically, what stands between where we are right now and mass utilization of everything we're talking about here, one of the key elements, there's clearly a lot of pieces, but one of the key elements that we hear from many of our customers is the call it a mental barrier, or sometimes an actual barrier where it comes to creative. Because everyone can dream about, yes, I want to create interactivity, or I want to create a personalized message and something that has many variations. But it requires to take my story and slice and dice it to many different versions. And the reaction we get from many marketers is that this is amazing. It may be relevant for a theatrical studio like a Disney, for example, that has amazing assets, but it's not relevant for everyone. or it is applicable for a retailer that has a lot of product, but it's not applicable for a pharmaceutical brand, for example, which it's not the case, but this is the feeling of many brands. So teaming up with creative team and production teams like Suraj is really what can unlock the success here. Is how do you take what's possible with the production skills and the ability to bring it to life and connect to the brand needs.
No, that's fascinating. One of the things we were looking into last year was how game design could become a bigger part of advertising creative. Thinking of choose your own adventure type ways of telling stories may allow creatives to visualize the kind of creative assets that could go into dynamic creative optimization. Suraj, have you seen anything like that happen with your teams or?
Yeah, actually, it's funny enough. Some of the work we did with Innovid and some of the work we did with one of our clients that's a product company, kitchen tabletop company. Basically, they have an ice cream maker, Ninja Creamy, and what we did was we actually worked with Hulu and figured out the binging insight around the behavior when audiences start binging shows on Hulu, and leverage their binge unit with Innovid technology to then build almost episodic content across the idea of this insight around, it takes about 3 episodes before people start eating while they're binging. Why don't we actually show them that in 3 episodes they can make ice cream and have it ready for them to enjoy while they're going into their next episode? So we actually utilized those spots in the binging experience on Hulu in streaming to then give them a personalized message based on whether they were a foodie that loved indulging in chocolate, or a health conscious individual that cared about more, fruits and fruits in their smoothies and ice cream, rather than say, vanilla or chocolate, what have you. So it's this idea of leveraging that consumer insight, that consumer behavior, and then trying to come up with an idea that is inspired by it, that I think really drives the greatest, impact and breakthrough with this type of work.
So Tal, then how does your dynamic creative optimization tools, how does it work with the data to then deliver, a variation or a personalized ad, in the moment?
Maybe before I jump in, I'm just going to say kudos to Suraj and team, because that execution, and to everyone who worked on it, obviously, on the Innovid side and others, but and to the Shark Ninja. But that was an awesome execution. Sorry for this shameless plug or picking up on this plug, but
I know.
It really summarized, jokes aside, but it really summarized everything we talked about, because it was amazing use of context, like Chick, you said earlier, is you're in a binge environment. So after watching the 3rd episode, you're committed and that you're doing that, and an amazing creative execution of leveraging that episodical content and playing a pun on the idea of binge watching, and again the use of the technology to enable all of that. That it's not a crazy execution that you do once in a lifetime, but something that is easily doable with existing capabilities. So again, I feel like it was a well executed element altogether. To your question about the use of data in personalization, I would say that there are 3 components to it. One is the production or the variation side. So how do you take a single creative and then branch it into many different versions? This is where data plays in order to, for example, work that we do with a lot of retailers is tapping into a data API of the different products that they have in their backend, in their ERP or in other systems, and allowing us to take real-time price feed, the product image and others, and combine them together. So rendering different versions of the ad. The second part is the real-time decisioning, is getting this context that we talked about earlier, the environment, any data segments that we know, and then matching it with all the versions that we have. In this case, we're leveraging data that Innovid can get access to, like a device ID or an IP address that allows us to know location, sometimes sequential messaging, time of day, or other things like that, or connecting to third-party data providers like LiveRamp or Newstar or a brand CDP. All of those are examples of ways that allows us to match this identifier with anything we know about a viewer. And then the third thing comes into measurement, because the idea is not only to serve different versions, but later understand that it actually drove results. So this is kind of a shameless plug to another area that we focus heavily at Innovid, which is measurement. We just completed a big acquisition of a company called TV Squared in the television measurement space, which we were extremely excited about. Part of the focus of TV Squared is the outcome side, is how do you connect a connected television or linear ad to a result. And that result could be a digital transaction, like a website traffic, an app download, a search lift, or things like that. Or it could be an offline one, like a store visitation or any other dealer visitation or purchase. So long story short, data is weaved through the whole process, from versioning to the serving and the real-time decisioning, all the way to data and outcomes.
So, and Suraj, are clients picking up on this? Are they still very much tied to the older ways of looking at measurement, or are they picking up on new outcomes-based ways of looking at performance?
Yeah, I would say clients, especially the ones we're working with at Mediabrands, we're looking at a lot more richness in the insights that we can gather from not only personalized creative, but media as well, right? So Tal mentions, at the production, when it's running based on real-time triggering, and then of course the back-end measurement. But I would say even things that supersede that is looking at audience segmentation ahead of even any of the creative briefing that we do, right? And looking at zero-party data that the brand is collecting or generating, looking at first-party data that might be off of, say, an owned site or an owned experience, like a mobile app that they have, and then and then of course syndicated data that's PII compliant, that can be purchased through third parties and what have you, and looking at all three of those, plus other sets of data to then inform the actual creative brief itself. And then from there, again, based on these rules and these abilities to identify and reach these audiences, then building content against that. But then on the back end, really looking at lead indicators that are above and beyond these old media metrics like click-through rate or even quartile completes, looking at things that really help us dictate last touch attribution, looking at things that help us then understand proper consumer journeys, which I think is key for a lot of clients. Even if you're a QSR client, that journey might be 2 or 3 steps that happen in your mind quickly, but there is an opportunity there depending on, again, normative data that we can get based on who you are, what type of brand and what type of advertising you do with your consumers. Can you then move the needle, right? And those lead indicators can help us define what the needle is and where you can move them. Of course, you have bigger brands like the American Expresses or the Rocket Mortgages of the world that utilize website actions as part of their consumer journey stage, or even a BMW, where that is key. And in those cases, with longer lead times and longer consumer journey kind of timelines, those types of things, they are critical for us to be able to then drive and maximize the lifetime value of a consumer.
Yeah, it's fascinating because we've seen companies like Oracle, who I know you have a partnership with at Innovid, and really trying to draw together in the MarTech stack the customer data platforms with journey orchestration and campaign management. And I suppose it's still maybe early days for that kind of thing, but it feels as if everything you're talking about is sort of tailor-made for this environment that's evolving as we speak.
100%. I can say, and I'm sure everyone experienced that in the last call it 5-7 years, there was a gold rush of data collection. A lot of companies, Oracle included, and Salesforce and Adobe and others that have a lot of enterprise software clients have been focusing on establishing the infrastructure that allows them to collect data. First-party data or zero-party data is the holy grail, and if not, expanding it with others. That was step one of the evolution: is collecting the data and having the infrastructure. Second one, in utilization, the first use case we've seen is in using that data for media targeting. That was maybe the most obvious use case. Again, in the paid media space, it's different in others, but in paid media space, media targeting using that data is a key element. And then now the third wave of that, if you will, about utilization is creative personalization and measurement. This is where we are right now, and we see that it's not foreign to customer because they already have the data and they've been using it for media targeting. Now it could be applicable in those environments.
Yeah, fascinating.
Not to go off script here real quick, but
of course,
shameless plug for
what is a script?
What's a script? I will say Innovid's been, and you know, we work with a lot of partners in the space and things like that. Innovid's been one of the premier partners that allow us to test, right? That allow us to break things and invent. And I think part of what we do, especially as we look at purchase data metrics and we think about more meaningful lead indicators, like being able to test that on the creative versioning side, which we've been doing a lot of that from the media targeting side, but being able to then apply that to creative versioning and really driving the most impactful creative, that's something that is still hard for a lot of technology companies, but Innovid has been a strong partner of ours to be able to push that forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, fascinating. It's also, I mean, let's talk a bit about Omni Channel in that how you can then push all of this through other devices, things of that nature, and still keep a sort of a coherent campaign vision going. Tal, is this something that Innovid can manage?
Yeah, and actually speaking on the point that Suraj mentioned about our great collaboration, this is one area where we spend a lot of time together, and Suraj and his team and Mediabrands is a big user of that. Is that we launched a product called Cdv Composer, which is a tool that allows you to essentially build once and deploy everywhere. Exactly as you said, the TV devices is a very fragmented market. There are many different devices, and if you think about it, maybe something that seems very basic and mundane but creates a lot of problems, that the remote is different. On an Apple TV, you swipe in order to navigate. On a Roku, you have a D-pad remote of left, right, up, and down. On an Xbox, it looks different, and you have a lot of other buttons. So even basic stuff like call to action on screen should vary and should mimic the remote that you carry. So to your question about how do we make it scale, we put a lot of work on device-specific integrations and app-specific integration that allows teams like Suraj's to build an amazing concept and build it once and not think about it that this would work really great on Roku, but on other places it will be a little iffy. So our idea is how it's leveraging technology to allow this idea to scale.
What does that look like from a design perspective? How does that then? This is something that your dynamic creative composition engine can do on the fly for each device.
I'll start, and I don't know if Suraj, you wanna speak more to that from your point of view. But yes, it is dynamically generated. For example, when we want to drive interactivity in the living room, or interactivity is a big word, but it could be as simple as watch more, learn more about the brand, explore more content, download an app. It doesn't have to be a crazy game that is being played on television. In order to do that, you need to have the right call to action to surface what is the right button to press and how to navigate that. So yes, part of the dynamic creative, we do change the graphics on the screen based on the device.
Yeah, and I think from a production standpoint, I know our teams, with some of this already pre-canned or built into the tools, it allows us to just not have to worry about little nuances like that and think about more of the core creative, and then, work with a partner like an Innovid to help us then they understand the platform and the native channel that this will be then distributed on. So I think about it a lot from a distribution standpoint, and knowing that they've taken advantage of the standardization or the lack thereof in some cases of call to actions, of the way consumers interact with an Apple TV versus a Roku versus a gaming device. Those types of things just allow our creatives and our designers to spend more time on the creative and the actual idea and the actual messaging for consumers, rather than having to come up with different mocks or having to come up with different different visuals that then have to be programmed in. So a lot of the pre-work that's done just saves us time on the back end, and it helps us just get to market quicker, which I think at the end of the day for most marketers is a big challenge when it comes to anything production.
Is there sort of an educational component to your strategic work then? Sort of getting the teams and the clients, giving them a better understanding of how this is going to work?
I don't know, Tal, if you want to take that.
Sure. Yeah, so I think the education goes both ways, both for clients and partner on the design side to think about it in the right way. So we're doing a lot of showcases type of video of what's possible and what are the features that the technology enables. But then there's a big education, frankly, of the viewers. Just slapping on a QR code on the screen doesn't mean that people will actually scan it. It's a 30-second spot that when viewers are not used to put up your phone and scan, that's not successful. Clearly, I think that at least in North America, during the pandemic, where a lot of restaurants and a lot of different places started to utilize QR code a lot more, and obviously Apple and Android including QR code as a scanner inside the basic camera app, that really helped propel the utilization of that. So the education piece is it goes both ways, both for clients and designers, but also for viewers.
Yeah, and I think from a design standpoint and a creative standpoint, our teams, where we started, and again, our journey started 8 years plus ago with Innovid, and when we started working with them initially, there was a lot of collaboration that happened, right? And I think Innovid helped manage a lot of the setup and the technical heavy back end of the work, and then as they've invented tools and self-service capabilities, our teams have ramped up and really taken that as an enterprise way of working. I think part of the way we like to work is to make sure that there's as little friction in the system when it relates to production and getting things out of the door, and a lot of that we put the onus on ourselves from a creative standpoint. Bring a content studio, we want to make sure the work is great, but having Innovid's team that can support if it's new technology, if it's new product, if it's something that we want to try and break their system, which we've tried to do a couple times at this point. But having the team available to support, I think, is important, which I think is part of the reason why in certain cases this may not work with other partners, where that richness and that inherent knowledge may not exist.
Mm-hmm. So Tal, do you we've been talking about in the industry now for I don't know how many years about the deprecation of third-party data and cookies and things of that nature. But everything you've all talked about today sounds as if it's a still very rich environment in which to be able to deliver messages to consumers. So is that a message that you still need to make in the marketplace about that, or are people starting to get it at this point?
It's a great point. I started hearing about this deprecation of cookies recently, so I'm kidding. Yes, it's the deprecation is around the corner. But I'll say a couple of things. First of all, yes, in order to do personalization, you require some form of knowledge about what we said earlier, context. Of the viewer, the device, the environment, the time, the location. All of that is required in order to take advantage or benefit from all the features that we mentioned. That's for sure. However, it does not all have to be call it privacy infringing, or something that is that require the user to give us very specific data point. Many of the things, like for example, I mentioned time of day, can make a big impact on personalization and resonance of the message, and that's a data point that is not disappearing, and it's not personal identified information in any way. To your question about cookies, we're giving a lot of examples here about the connected television world and the living room space. Cookies were never an attribute that were available in that world, so no technology was built with cookies in mind. Mm-hmm. The second attribute that is being kind of under attack, for lack of a term, is Apple's IDFA. And even that has limited impact on the connected television space. That's not to say that we're not thinking about of a world of how can we get to that context in a respectable way and in a more sustainable way. For example, part of our latest, we just reported our earnings, and in our earnings we highlighted the partnership Innovid has with NBCU to build personalized products and using data segments that are coming from an authenticated environment within Peacock. So similar to what Suraj said within Hulu, that Hulu knows that you're binging through a show, so they know that data. This is not private data, but it allows you to change the message and make it significantly more relevant to the environment that you're in right now. Peacock is doing similar things on different type of attributes, and we are excited to partner with them on that.
Yeah, and so Suraj, are many of the the client side folks, the strategists, if they're coming from the digital side, are they disappointed that they can't use the kinds of cookie level cohort type segmentation that they've been used to, and they're buying into these new ways of working?
It's funny. Every time I hear cookie deprecation, I just see a sad cookie monster just being like, "We're on it now." But I think cookies. The reality with consumers is, and this is superseded any type of technology requirement, is that consumers expect personalization now, right? Especially with the proliferation of the cell phones and the smartphones years ago, and now with the pandemic pushing that even further. There's a level, especially as we think about millennials and Gen Z, that this is something that they know. They're a lot more wise to businesses and brands and platforms tracking their information and being so opting into that information, right? So when we think about it from a brand's perspective, of course, third-party cookies can help us direct attention. But then we know with that deprecation coming, the two things are extremely important. That data that comes from the publishers, as well as some of these qualified environments, say the Hulus of the world and things of that nature, but then also multivariant testing, because the reality of the post-exposure reporting and the post-exposure behavior that a consumer takes on creative, and this is why interactivity is so powerful. It helps us make better creative decisions and better media decisions for the business, because ultimately that multivariant testing gets us to a place where we know, even with the lack of that one-to-one, third-party cookie connection, that this type of cohort, this type of cluster segment actually does resonate with this type of creative. And then on the back end, is there correlation to actual sales metrics, right? So knowing media has always been kind of fragmented in this type of way, whether it be the rise of walled gardens, programmatic, whether it be TV, where there's been just a lot of a lot of the space has been its own type of measurement and reporting. I think having a technology backbone like an Innovid helps us do things not only multi-channel, but also think about things from a unified creative perspective, which is not something that's been common in the past.
No, that's fascinating. So there's been a lot of interesting disruption even in the streaming space now as it matures, and we're coming out of the pandemic. Lots of interesting market dynamics going on. Netflix adding advertising. So let's look out, let's say, a year or two. And Tal, what do you think, what is the experience of watching TV and the future of advertising on TV going to look like?
I think we'll be remiss, or every panel needs someone to say metaverse on the panel in order to be a real panel in 2022. So I can say that. But no, jokes aside, what's the future? I'm just going to play on what you said. We kind of feel like we're now streaming emerged by early adapters at the beginning that bought devices and sign up to different services. And clearly throughout the pandemic, there was a massive boom of both of them, more devices sold and more services launching. And right now, if you look at public market or other attribute, it looks like there's a little bit of a bust to that world. But in our mind, this is just the beginning of a second of the second age or second act of streaming, which means that there will be a lot more services that probably will be bundled somehow together because it's very hard and somewhat expensive to get all of it. It will be a lot more ad supported as a test by changes in Disney Plus, by hinting by Netflix and even HBO Max that is pushing a lot more into ads, and now with the merger of Warner Bros, it will be even more. And maybe the last thing is a lot that we talked about here is. This is just my personal bet, but those two companies that we just mentioned, Disney Plus or services Disney Plus and Netflix, are two services that could not really afford to have a crappy ad experience. It's pretty obvious that when they will roll out advertising on their services, it would feel a little different because everything that they brought so far was just this magic in a bottle, or this idea of taking content that was available before, but significantly improve the user experience of it. I would bet that same apply to advertising, and it could be because it would use significantly better personalization, interactivity, better storytelling, tying to content. It could be many different things, but my bet is that this second act of streaming, if you will unleash new ways to tell stories for marketing on streaming.
And Suraj.
Look, I think Tal is exactly right. This second act of streaming, ultimately, it all boils down for advertisers, in my opinion, to attention, right? Marketing and media can drive attention better than most things, and whether it be the metaverse and these new service providers and new game applications, whether it be integration into more interactivity and more of a VR environment for some of these even streaming partners that may enter this type of space. It all goes back to where are consumer eyeballs, and I think personalization is our best opportunity to actually direct said attention to the most relevant message. But then that personalization can also attract that engagement, right, in a more efficient manner. And I think ultimately for marketers, regardless of if you're, in a blockchain environment in the metaverse, or if you're watching a streaming channel on on Hulu, or if you're, on your device, ultimately it's all to the end consumer the same thing. It's that, brand BMW that's going to show up, Johnson & Johnson that's going to show up. It's for us as marketers to figure out how those experiences, how those nuances in technology and data help us really craft connections, craft messaging. And then the better we are with understanding the technology and building operations to think about the new world and not just the matching luggage of the past, we as marketers will do a better job for our consumers.
No, that's great, and it sort of ties right into our last question for the audience is, but I think you really just nailed it already. Is the key things that marketers and agencies really need to think about right now? Like what specific things? Sort of pulling us back into the present, which is still rich with many opportunities.
You want to take it first, Tal?
Yeah, you can go.
Sure. I think
you're doing such an amazing job. So who am I to stand in your way?
This is it's a 1, 2, 3 punch, right? I love it. But I think, look, I think at the end of the day, what marketers can do today is really take a step back and look at, one, their operations, right? Who are the key players that they have at the agencies, whether it be creative, whether it be media? How can they work with the likes of an Innovid or other technology partners that can help them enrich what they're trying to do from a business standpoint? Because ultimately that's the KPI, or whatever KPI they're trying to move is going to dictate how they go to market. And with that, they can be incremental changes. There can be incremental updates they can do to creative, they can do to the media. They can work with partners like Innovid to make sure that they're getting that incrementality out of their business impact. And that's where they should start. It's this whole cliche of boiling the ocean that can become very real with the dynamic technology. But the reality is, if you start like building blocks, you will all of a sudden get to an enterprise solution, which is what we've done with a number of our clients who've been on this journey with us. And they're at a point now where they're seeing this be their biggest driver of ROI. They're seeing this be the greatest place where they can have an authentic message. And that's the promise, right? You have a more meaningful connection that ultimately drives your business KPIs.
Oh, fantastic. So Tal, last words.
Just to play on what Suraj was saying, is on the boil the ocean component. There's a saying that I love. One of our partner, John Halverson at Mondelez, he told me something that he's thinking a lot about, is the idea of explore and exploit. So do a lot of experiments, but once something actually sticks, and there are narrow experiments, and as Sarah said, now don't boil the ocean. But when something sticks, exploit the hell out of it. So really do that. Don't do it just for the sake of experimenting and then move on, but know how to measure success. And once it actually works, now scale it up to see if it really works at scale, and change your mindset with it. Because if you just do experiment for the sake of experimenting, then it's nice on a tiny budget, never really drive the needle, and it stays there. If you want to push things forward and really innovate, so explore on small scale, and once it's work, exploit it.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing many great case studies in the near future based on all of this stuff. And for all of you, please to get connected to Innovid to learn more about this and to start experimenting and learning these things. I'm just going to bring the screen back up and let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and it's going to be available on our site in probably about 24 hours. After that, we wanted to remind you also that we have another webinar coming up about cookie deprecation with another partner having to do with contextual advertising. And we're going to leave you with that and welcome you back whenever you come back to see the videos or things of that nature. But have a wonderful day, and thank you all very much, and our illustrious panelists, very illustrious, to this terrific day with Innovid. I learned a lot, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and again, thank you, Suraj, for an amazing multi-year partnership.
Thank you. Thanks, Chick. Thanks for everything.
Thanks, Suraj.
Thank you, Chick.
Thanks, Tal.
Thank you.